On a bitter winter evening, a weary young woman trudged home, gripping a bag of medicine for her gravely ill father. She paused abruptly when she noticed a pale boy, trembling alone in the snow, cradling a malformed hand. Without a second thought, she took him to her home, offering food, warmth, and safety. Unbeknownst to her, this simple act of compassion would transform her life forever. Before we unravel this tale, let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to hear your thoughts. The wind wailed through the narrow streets of North Philly, slinking past boarded-up storefronts and rattling the chain-link fences around. Empty lots. Snow fell in heavy, languid swirls, piling on broken stoops and the edges of forgotten benches. From the foggy window of a rundown clinic, a dim orange glow spilled onto the icy sidewalk. Inside, Amara Wilson sat beside her father in the waiting area, her hands wrapped tightly around a crinkled paper pharmacy bag, warm from her touch, edges soft with dampness. Her shift at the corner store had dragged on, tips barely covering the bus fare. Yet she'd hurried through sleet and gusts to grab the heart medication before the pharmacy locked up. Amara, just 24, was a slender black woman with skin like polished ebony and eyes heavy with a weariness no one her age should bear. Her braided hair was tucked into a loose knot, and under the harsh clinic lights, the worry etched on her face aged her beyond her years. Her jacket was too light for the cold, threads unraveling at the hem. One sneaker let in slush through a cracked sole. Still, her hold on the bag was fierce, as if it carried more than pills, as if it carried her father's next breath. Her father, Mr. Clarence, coughed beside her, a rasping, brittle sound, each exhale sharp as a blade. In his late 60s, his skin a warm chestnut laced with grey stubble. He sat slumped under a worn scarf. His face was gaunt, lips chapped, yet his eyes held a quiet pride the years couldn't dim. Amara leaned close, brushing snow from his coat, murmuring, "Dad, hang in there. I'm right here with you." Her voice was soft but resolute, almost defiant. He gave a faint nod, jaw tight to hide the pain. He needed quiet, or maybe just air. Amara rose and headed down the hall to a heavy door opening onto a small balcony. The cold stung her face as she stepped out. She exhaled, her breath swirling in the icy air. The railing was slick with frost, and snowflakes drifted under the faint glow of a streetlight across the way. Pulling her phone from her pocket, she checked for signal, barely a bar. Then a faint sound cut through the wind's low moan. A soft cry, not animal, not adult, something delicate, trembling like a thread about to snap. Her gaze swept the snow-dusted courtyard below. There, tucked against a barren tree's roots, was a small figure, a boy, no older than 11, skin ghostly pale, light brown hair plastered to his brow. His left hand was clutched to his chest, bent at an unnatural angle, twisting Amara's gut. His sweatshirt was thin, soaked, no match for the cold. His knees shook, his face ashen, lips faintly purple. Her heart lurched. She gripped the icy rail, then spun back, racing down the hall, past the reception desk, down the stairs, her sneakers thudding on concrete. Hey, little one, what are you doing out here?" she called, dropping to her knees in the snow beside him. Her voice was steady but urgent, the tone of someone used to comforting those she loved. "Are you lost? Where's your family?" The boy looked up, eyes wide but hazy. His cheeks were raw from the cold. He flinched as she reached out, then whispered, barely audible, "Don't make me go back. Please, I can't." Amara froze, her pulse quickening. She draped her scarf around his shoulders, tucking it gently, shielding him from the wind with her body. Her hands shook, not from the chill, but from a fierce instinct rising within her. The boy was freezing alone, scared. Something deep and protective stirred. "You're not going anywhere tonight, okay?" she said softly, brushing snow from his hair. "You're safe with me." Her voice had a warmth honed by years of watching loved ones struggle, of holding them close when nothing else could be fixed. She didn't know his story or his name. She didn't need to. No child should be left to freeze alone. Without hesitation, Amara scooped up the trembling boy, holding his fragile frame against her chest. The snow fell steadily as she moved toward the streetlight, her steps careful but sure, a silent promise in every stride. No one gets abandoned tonight. Her apartment door groaned as she pushed it open. balancing the boy in her arms before nudging it shut. The room was barely warm, the radiator hissing faintly, but it was enough to thaw the ice on his lashes. The air smelled of mint tea and old books, of hardship laced with resilience. Faded walls held photos of Amara and her father, and a chipped mug sat on the counter with cold chamomile tea. Her father, Clarence, sat in an armchair, a thin quilt over his knees, hands unsteady as he gripped a warm water bottle. His face, rich as dark oak, creased with worry when he saw Amara return, not alone. "Who's that, baby girl?" His voice was faint, rough, each word a labor. Amara set the boy on the sagging couch. "Found him outside the clinic, Dad. He was freezing all by himself." Her tone was hushed but pressing, as if she were still processing her choice. She pulled her scarf from the boy's shoulders and slipped into the kitchen. Soon, a pot simmered with vegetable broth cobbled together from pantry scraps. She soaked a cloth in warm water and knelt beside the boy, who had curled into himself, lips quivering. She wiped his face gently, and when he tensed, she murmured, "It's okay, sweetheart. No one's going to hurt you here. You're safe, you're warm." Amara studied him, then asked softly, "What's your name? Where's home?" "Someone's got to be worried about you." The boy turned away, staring at the wall. "Don't know," he mumbled. After a beat, he added, "Mom said not to tell. Adults don't help. They just send you back." Her chest tightened, but she kept her voice even. "Back where, honey?" He shook his head, burrowing into the scarf. "If I tell, they'll find me. They always do." She didn't press. Instead, she sat beside him, one hand gently smoothing his hair, the other resting over his cold fingers, offering warmth over questions. "Okay," she said quietly. "You don't have to talk yet, just rest. No one's taking you anywhere tonight." He cracked his eyes open and whispered, "Why?" She paused, the cloth dripping into the bowl. "Because someone should have done this for me when I was young," she said, more to herself than him. Her father, watching from the armchair, murmured, "Every heart deserves shelter, baby, even the ones that wander." The boy's fever eased past midnight, but the trembling lingered. Amara stayed awake, perched by the couch, wiping his brow and warming his hands. When he whimpered, she read softly from a worn children's book found under a side table. He didn't say much, but he didn't pull away. Outside, snow blanketed the street in silence, softening the city's edges. Inside, the lamp's glow cast long shadows, turning the cramped room into a haven. In the early hours, the boy stirred, sweat matting his hair. Amara, half dozing on the coffee table, spooned warm porridge into a bowl. When he jolted upright, wincing, she was at his side. "Easy now," she said, voice thick with exhaustion. "You had us worried." He looked at her, really looked, his eyes holding a fragile spark, like hope trying to take root in barren ground. "They're always sticking me with needles." "I hate it," he muttered. "I hate the machines. I just wanted to be somewhere else." Amara's lips parted, but she stayed quiet. Instead, she spooned porridge, cooled it with a gentle blow, and offered it. "Here, no needles, just oats and a bit of honey I nabbed from work." Her smile was faint but genuine. He took the spoon, its soft clink against his teeth filling the quiet. The silence between them was warm, not hollow. By morning, as pale light pierced the grey clouds, Amara zipped her jacket to fetch more medicine. The boy rested, wrapped in a quilt her father had pulled from a closet. She lingered at the door, glancing back. Then came the crunch of tires on snow, slow, heavy, deliberate. She stepped outside as 3 sleek black SUVs pulled up, out of place in this worn corner of Philly. 4 men in sharp coats emerged, scanning the street with precision. Then the final door opened. A man stepped out, tall, angular, in a pristine overcoat and tailored suit, scarf knotted like a signature. His grey hair was neatly combed, his eyes like cold slate, locking onto Amara as if she were a puzzle to solve. "Are you Amara Wilson?" he asked, voice low, edged with authority. She blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, He cut her off, striding toward the door. "You have 10 seconds to explain before I involve the authorities. I warned them about these streets and now this." She stepped into his path, arms slightly raised, not aggressive but firm. Her heart pounded, but her voice held steady. "Sir, with respect, your son was alone in the snow, sick. He could have. Save it, he interrupted, pushing past. This area's full of opportunists. Don't act like this wasn't planned. His words stung like frostbite. Inside, her father had risen shakily, one hand on the couch where the boy slept, unaware. Amara moved deliberately, her steps heavy with purpose. I didn't ask for anything, she said, voice taut. I helped him because he was a kid in trouble. That's it. Edward Grayson turned slowly. For a moment his eyes flickered, not with guilt, but with the stirrings of doubt. He looked at his son, wrapped in a faded quilt, a world away from his life of private hospitals and polished penthouses. The boy stirred, murmuring in his sleep, Don't make me go back. Please, no more. Amara's jaw clenched. She didn't need to say more. The boy had said enough. I ran away, the boy said, his voice gaining strength. I didn't want more treatments. They hurt and no one listens. They say it's for my good, but it just hurts. He looked at Amara, then her father, then back at Edward. But she listened. She gave me soup, told me stories. She didn't treat me like I was broken, just like I was a kid. Edward's lips parted, but no words came. He stared at his son, his only child, nestled in a stranger's quilt, speaking more openly than he ever had in their sterile mansion of hushed staff and closed doors. Amara watched him not for validation, but for recognition. She didn't need an apology. She needed him to understand. Slowly, Edward stepped closer, eyes fixed on his son. I didn't realize you felt that way, he said softly, his voice stripped of its sharpness. I thought the best care, the best specialists. You thought money fixed it, the boy said plainly. But it doesn't fix being alone. The silence that followed was alive, heavy with change. For the first time, Edward looked around the small apartment, not with disdain, but with awareness. The peeling wallpaper, the faint scent of broth, the worn shoes by Clarence's feet. It was a story of endurance, not greed. I owe you both an apology, he said, turning to Amara, then Clarence. I misjudged everything. Amara's shoulders eased, though she didn't smile. Her voice was soft, careful. He just needed a night where he wasn't a patient. Edward nodded, then reached into his coat, pulling out a checkbook. He scribbled, tore off a slip, and held it out. She glanced at the number, staggering, but shook her head. I didn't help him for money, she said, chin lifted. I helped because he needed it. For a moment, Edward seemed disarmed. Then he let out a quiet, surprised chuckle, tucking the check away. Fair enough, he said. But perhaps I can offer something else, a job. My foundation works with communities like yours. We need someone who sees people, not just problems. Amara hesitated, the offer feeling like a dream too big to trust. But she met his gaze, steady. And my father? His care is covered, Edward said without pause. Not charity, a debt for what you gave my son that I couldn't. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she adjusted the quilt around the boy's shoulders, looked at Edward and nodded once. Outside, the snow slowed, flakes falling gently now, like a sigh from the sky. Across the street, neighbors drifted from their windows. The moment had passed, but something new had begun. The elevator at the Grayson Foundation purred as it rose. Amara stood inside, clutching a battered notebook like a shield. Through the glass, Philadelphia's skyline sparkled under winter sun. But her reflection in the polished doors told a humbler story. Tired eyes, a borrowed jacket, a heart racing beneath the faint scent of home-cooked stew and laundered linens. She'd been here 3 weeks. A program assistant at a desk by a noisy copier, where the radiator groaned like it resented her presence. She hadn't seen Edward since the day he offered the job. A brief nod in the lobby. Nothing more. The office was all glass and steel, sterile and brisk. Staff hurried past in crisp blazers, tossing around terms like metrics and outreach. Amara offered polite smiles, met with curt nods or blank stares. She felt the whispers, the glances. That's her, the one from the story, the one from North Philly. During a team meeting, she stood to pitch a program for art therapy for children with disabilities, inspired by the boy's ordeal, but backed by research. Her voice was steady, but the silence after she spoke was heavy. Then came a chair's creak. Sylvia Harper, the director of initiatives, late 40s, with sleek auburn hair and a tailored suit, cleared her throat sharply. Amara, that's touching. But it's not quite feasible. she said, her smile thin. We need data-driven impact, not stories. But thank you. Amara sat slowly, her face warm. The meeting rolled on, her words buried under talk of scalability and budgets. No one met her eyes. That night in the stark office bathroom, she locked herself in a stall, knees tucked up, tears falling quietly against the cold tile. In her pocket was a drawing the boy had sent, a crayon sketch of a woman and a kid under a bright sun, with "Thank you for seeing me," scrawled below. She held it, then stood, fixed her hair, and whispered to the mirror, "You've faced worse." The next week was a quarterly pitch session, attended by senior staff, donors, and Edward himself. Amara wasn't slated to speak, but she'd printed a revised proposal, data, community partners, and a pilot plan rooted in her old neighborhood. She stood at the room's edge, folder in hand, watching as proposals were politely dismissed. Too niche, untested, lacks alignment. Then came a flashy tech initiative for virtual health, workshops in underserved schools, expensive, polished, empty. After a pause, Edward raised a hand. "Anyone else?" he said calmly. "Someone we haven't heard yet." Eyes turned to him, then to Amara. Her stomach knotted, but her feet moved. She stepped forward, setting her folder on the table. Her hands were clammy, but her voice was clear. "I'd like to propose a program called Open Echo," she began. "It's for kids with chronic conditions or disabilities who feel unheard. It uses art, not for show, but for expression, connection, healing." She spoke without slides, just her words. "Last winter, I found a boy outside a clinic sick, scared, not because medicine failed, but because no one heard him. What helped was a warm meal, a quiet song, a moment to feel human. I've been poor, invisible, helped not out of pity, but respect. This isn't about handouts. It's about giving kids their voices back. I've lined up volunteers, logistics, everything." When she finished, the room was silent, heavy with weight. Then a donor exhaled. That was moving. A single clap sounded, then another. Edward didn't speak, but his gaze held something new. Not duty, not pity, but respect. As the meeting broke, Sylvia passed Amara with a quick, "Nice pitch." Amara didn't reply. She didn't need to. Later, an email arrived. Program approved. Full funding? "Welcome to the work." Amara leaned back, eyes shut briefly. She pulled the crayon drawing from her pocket, smoothed it and pinned it above her desk, in an office with her name on the door. Open Echo was born, and she hadn't just earned a place, she'd carved one. Snow fell softly the morning the Caleb Center opened, not the harsh, biting snow of that night months ago, but delicate flakes floating in the dawn's grey light, dusting the sidewalk outside the new community hub on Girard Avenue. The building, once a shuttered pharmacy, now glowed with wide windows and warm lights. A mural of children painting and laughing on its side. Above the entrance, in simple steel letters, the Caleb Center. A place to be heard. Amara stood by the door, guiding her father over the salted path. Clarence, his steps slow but steadier, wore a new navy coat, though he clung to his old knit cap. He squeezed her hand. "You built this, baby girl," he said, voice warm with pride. Inside, the lobby hummed with quiet activity, staff tuning guitars, volunteers arranging tables, children arriving with parents, some hesitant, others in wheelchairs, eyes bright with cautious hope. A few paused at a framed sketch in the hall, a pencil drawing of a boy with one hand tucked close, the other reaching out. On a small stage, Amara adjusted a microphone, smoothing a blank note card she didn't need. The boy, Caleb, approached, his right hand still curled inward, his left clutching a folded paper. His light hair was neat but stubborn, his face less gaunt, more certain. Amara knelt, fixed his collar, and whispered, "Ready?" He nodded. "Sort of," he said, then added, "It's okay to be nervous, right?" Her smile softened. "It's okay to feel it all." Caleb climbed the stage steps carefully but confidently. His voice, thin but steady, filled the room. "Hi, I'm Caleb. I used to be scared a lot. I didn't want more tests or machines or rooms that made me feel small. Then I met Miss Amara. She gave me soup, stories, and said I wasn't broken, just different." He held up his paper, hand trembling slightly. "She said art doesn't care if your hands work right. It hears your heart." This place is for kids like me, who don't always know how to say what hurts, but still need to be heard. The room didn't burst into applause. It didn't need to. The silence was warm, enveloping. Edward stood at the back, hands clasped in a simple coat. His face wasn't proud, but reflective, as if seeing the ripple of that snowy night. Amara joined him as Caleb stepped down. She glanced at Edward, her voice soft. He's becoming more than any doctor predicted. He nodded, because someone gave him room to grow. They watched the children in the art room, where hesitant brushstrokes grew bolder on canvases. A boy laughed at a smudged line. A girl tried again, slower. No one corrected them. That was the point. Later, as the ribbon was cut and cameras flashed, Amara and Clarence stood in the snowy courtyard. Across the street, their old apartment stood, its windows catching the light. It wasn't just where this began. It was proof of resilience, of small acts of quiet change. Amara looked at the plaque by the entrance. Warmth isn't in wealth, it's in kindness. The words resonated, felt deeply by those who'd known cold. Edward approached, his steps softer than before. I came that morning to retrieve my son, he said quietly. Instead, I found someone to move forward with. Amara's smile was gentle but firm, and I found a purpose bigger than a job, a family I didn't expect. They stood together, watching Caleb laugh with kids at a canvas. Snow falling softly around them. The world hadn't shifted overnight, but something had begun. A hand extended in the cold is more than a moment, it's a spark. Join us to share stories that matter by hitting like and subscribe. Don't forget to tap the notification bell for daily doses of inspiration and empathy.